All right, rise and fall of the Aztec Empire. So we got a real quick rundown on the timeline of what we talked about so far, starting roughly 23,000 years ago. Um, we've got the Solutrean hypothesis, which, if you remember, talks about um, Neolithic Europeans crossing over the ice flows across the Atlantic into North America. We got coastal migration, which discusses Neolithic Asians taking boats down the west coast of North America, all the way down into South America. The Clovis peoples, um, that's the Bering Land Bridge theory, right, where the natives came from Asia across the land bridge and then came down through Canada into North America. So if you look at the archaeological data between these three peoples, they kind of came in waves. And then once they got over here, they all intermingled, and at least that's what the genetics is showing. So there's no one real dominance of one group over another. They just kind of existed as hunter gatherers, disparate tribes traveling all over the continents there. When we get into Olmecs, and this is the first real civilization to pop up in Mesoamerica around 2500 BC to about 400 BC. And then we discussed the Mayas, right? And these guys span from before the Common Era, about 700 BCE, into about 900 BCE. Now, the Maya, that's as far as their classical civilization goes. The Maya themselves, they still exist as a people today, as native tribes down there in southern Mexico. And then we talked about the Inca civilization, and these guys were way down in South America, if you remember, from about 1100 to 1533. But really, the Inca Empire, if you remember, that was only about 97 years. And then today we're going to talk about the Aztec, which also was only about 100 years. So this is where we are. Back to the maps, right? This is where we are in Tampa, and the Aztec, they were centered in Mexico City, um, very close to where the old Olmec San Lorenzo is. If you remember, the Maya were over here in the Yucatan Peninsula, and then the Inca were all the way down here in South America, in Peru. So their origin myth, they believe they came out of a place called Aztlan. Modern archaeologists and historians and everybody think Aztlan was either in northern Mexico or southwestern United States. And what this is seven tribes came out of seven caves. This coming out of the ground creation myth, it sort of echoes like the Hopi Indians, the cliff dwellers in the ancient Anasazi. They also have myths where they came up out of the ground. Some tribe, northern Mexico, southwest, yep, and they migrated. So they came from north down to the south. And remember, there were already peoples living there, the Mayans, and previous to them, the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Aztec themselves. They had a great affinity for the Toltecs. So the tribe settled in central Mexico, and they created city states. As these tribes came down, these seven tribes, as they came down, they settled into the ancient Toltec cities, the ones that were left in ruins, and they kind of took over those. The Mexica, uh, also known as uh, Titlan, the Titlan people, but they also went by Mexica. They were the last tribe to come down. The Aztec name itself is a modern name. These people wouldn't have known themselves by that name. So we have We're gonna put that. There we go. Got this picture here, and this talks about their settlement. So part of their origin myth was that they would know where their final home was going to be when they saw an eagle on a cactus. And here in a minute we'll talk about that. But that eagle on a cactus thing is so prevalent with the culture that even today, this is the Great Seal of Mexico, and it shows a Mexican eagle sitting on a cactus eating a snake. And this is the seal of New Mexico, which has the Mexican eagle sitting on a cactus eating a snake, overshadowed by the American bald eagle. So moving on, warfare. The Aztec warriors were pretty proficient. In the beginning, when they first came in, remember I said that the Mexica, they were the last tribe to move into the region. They acted as mercenaries. They acted working for other tribes as warriors. Now, if you watch the bonus video for the class, the History Channel's Engineering and Empire, you'll find out why they got exiled. But for now, we're just going to leave it as there was a disagreement with one of the tribes, and they got sent to Lake Texcoco. Now, when they got to Lake Texcoco, there is an island in the lake, and that's where they saw this scene, and it sort of fulfilled their creation prophecy that when they got to that island, they saw an eagle on a cactus eating a snake. So that's where they knew they were gonna live. Now that today that lake is completely dried up. It's gone. It's now Mexico City. So the Aztec, they lived on that island, and then they created all these little floating islands with which they had agriculture. They grew crops there, kind of like a aquaponics setup for those of you that took ag last year. They built these causeways, these bridges going to the mainland, and they allied with these people called the Tepanecs, who were on the mainland. Tepanecs, they ended up in a civil war, and that civil war ended up in a triple alliance. What we name the Aztecs was actually three different tribes who were in alliance with each other. The Tenochtitlan, also known as the Mexica, the Texaco peoples, or Texcoco peoples, and the Tlacopan peoples. These came out of the Tepanex Civil War as the dominant tribes in the area. They expanded their reach to cover this entire Mexican basin here. And a basin is like a bowl, like a wash basin, right? It's just a bowl. So this is kind of a low, depressed area within Mexico. That's what allows that lake to be there. Went from East Coast over here, where the Olmecs were, to the West Coast. The Toltecs, the ancient Toltec, we didn't talk about them, but they kind of existed here. This is in central Mexico. Remember, the Maya lived here, and there were still Mayan people there. And then the Incas, they were way down south. Now, their empire was built on tribute. It was a tribute system. So they did just like the Incas. They would go around to all the tribes in the area and demand tribute. And if the tribes didn't provide tribute, then they would engage in warfare on the tribes to extract tribute. And just like everyone else, all the European powers, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Syrians, the Iranians, they all engaged in that same type of warfare. This up here, this is a scene from an Aztec codex from one of their. When you guys do your graves reports, if you look up the writing system of the Aztecs, they wrote books. They had a very advanced written language, and that's one of the scenes of the Spanish conquest that the Aztecs themselves wrote about. And when we get into the Spanish conquistadors, we'll talk a little bit more about Hernan Cortez. When I grew up, it was kind of an Anglicized name, Hernando Cortez, spelled with a Z, uh, but that was his name, Hernan Cortez. He was originally ordered just to explore Mexico, but once he got there and got the word of how much gold and riches and everything else was laying about, he just went all in to conquer the area. He originally landed down here at Cozumel. You may know what Cozumel is. These days, it's a resort. He got word while there that there was a couple white guys living on the other side. So he sailed around here to Campeche, where he met two Spaniards who were originally shipwrecked, and they got taken in by the local tribe and were living with the local tribe as one of their own. One of the Spanish went with Cortez and acted as a translator. I remember the Aztec, uh, they're extracting tribute from all these local tribes. And so Cortez, just like Pizarro in Peru, he was able to make allies with all these local tribes, and then he marched on Tenochtitlan in order to conquer the Aztec, conquer Montezuma at the time. So that's a quick little outline. And if you have any questions, go ahead and let me know.